A lot of rules were released today. We're talking about a faster play clock, 25 seconds. After a touchdowns, there's 3 options to score 1 point, 2 point, 3 points. Dean Blandino, officiating head, says with no kickers involved for any of them. There's new kicking rules and everything. With all these new rules, what was the goal of the XFL? To make it faster, quicker, and more exciting, I'd assume?
Yeah, so I think the goal was to, play that up-tempo, fast-paced game, and that's based on what fans told us. We did a boatload of market research, focus groups, etc., and fans basically said this. You know this. It's the same thing you hear. They love the game, but there's too much idle time, too much downtime. Make it go a little bit quicker, a little bit more action. Get rid of those meaningless plays. Turn them into meaningful plays, right? You're a former kicker. You knock the ball out of the end zone on your kickoffs. That's a meaningless play for most fans because there's no return. That's what they want to see. They love you, Pat, love the strength of your leg, but they want to see the kickoff return. So, we had the time, and Vince McMahon, the owner of our league, founder of our league, gave us the time to really sit and think, listen to the fans, and try to design a game that's traditional football, but it has a couple of innovations that'll really help us play fast, play up-tempo, and score a bunch of points.
Now, when you're building a league from ground up, and now the XFL happened years ago, but this is a completely different world now with the XFL. Obviously, the first time around, you weren't involved. It was supposed to be just a stadium event that they forced onto television, but now you were tasked with this job of building a league from ground up. What was your number one idea or number one thing you had to get accomplished first?
Well, I think there were a couple of things. The first thing was really to figure out what kind of a game we wanted, right? Because the game of football is great. Fans right now love football. I think we're in an era where we're seeing peak football. It can't get much better in terms of what you have both at the professional and college level. But we wanted to make sure we could figure out what kind of a game would align with what fans wanted. That's number one. And the second thing is pretty simple. We needed great coaches, right? I'm a big believer in the power of a great coach. And guys like, Bob Stoops or June Jones, Pep Hamilton, Winston Moss, all these guys, Jim Zorn, these guys that we were able to sign. Mark Trestman won a couple of Grey Cups up in Canada. We think these are very, very competent, really strong, good head coaches. And you get those good coaches and coaching staffs, in turn, you can recruit some pretty good players. Right, so we think we've got 560 players right now in Houston working their tail off at training camp. We think those are the best 560 players not under contract with the National Football League. And these are guys, Pat, they're all Americans. They're former high draft choices. It's tough. It's very tough. You and I both know as former players, it's tough to make an NFL roster and to stick on that roster for a number of years.
I agree completely. It is very difficult. Good coaching is a big deal. Obviously, I loved Pep Hamilton. Got a chance to talk to Pep Hamilton. He actually made a DC Defender fan out of Ty Schmidt after chatting with him, which is good. That's kind of been a fun part of the XFL, by the way, is watching people pick the teams that they're going to back that they have no allegiance to see how it goes. Now, one thing that the NFL is kind of riddled with problems right now is the officiating. You guys signed Dean Blandino as your head of officiating, and there's 9 refs on the field. There's one person that's just there to spot the ball so the game will be quicker. And then there's this Hawkeye technology that'll be judging and reviewing rules. What is this, and why should people be excited about this? And do you expect some of your concepts, just like the Skycam did with the first XFL, to be taken over to the NFL?
Well, I don't know about, our concepts, sort of migrating to the NFL. They've got a bunch of smart people on their competition committee, and they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out. But the Hawkeye is basically our instant replay system. It's a great system. We'll have a sky judge who's able to, to inject himself into a game to overturn an egregious call. We want to get the calls right, but we also want to do that quickly. So we're giving the Hawkeye guy 60 seconds max to make a decision. We don't want the pace of the game to be affected too much. Dean Blandino, I think, is maybe the most competent, the smartest guy around in terms of how to put, an officiating program together to get the 6 teams that we'll have of officials, but also to make sure that our philosophy, which is not to be overly technical, right, to get that philosophy shared by all the officiating crews. It's a hard game to officiate. You and I both know that. But we want to get it right, but also don't want to affect the pace of play. We think we can get a great up-tempo game, with the same number of plays, more or less, that you have in a National Football League game, with, all under 3 hours, including a potential overtime.
Well, hello there. Utilize the promo code PAYTHEBILLS and get $20 off your first order from SeatGeek. Now, back to the magic. Okay, so whenever these rules are being pitched, I love the shootout idea. 5 and 5 is from the 5 yard. That's first and goal from the 5 yard line 5 times for each team, basically, and it's a shootout to see who can score more, 3-2, 4-1, whatever it is. And whenever these ideas are pitched, I would just like to imagine myself in the brainstorming room. Are you up there and you're just like, all right, who has the best idea? And you guys are writing this on dry erase board. You're like, a shootout from the 5, genius. Okay, a kickoff where the entire coverage teams and return teams are within 5 yards of each other from the 30 and 35 of the return team. Perfect. If they kick it into the end zone, bring it out to the 35. No coffin corner punts. Like, how did the reimagining of football take place for the XFL?
So anybody like you or me who loves the game would have loved to be a part of this thing. So we spent a lot of time first listening to the fans, and then number two, bringing a bunch of smart people into the room. Not all football experts. We had health and safety people in there. We had TV production people to make sure that we were kind of looking at all the angles. And we wanted to make sure, and this was the key, Pat, we wanted to make sure that every one of our innovations had a strong underlying rationale, right? Okay, this will really help us score more points, or this will help us, play up-tempo, fast-paced in terms of, for example, the coach-to-player communication, or this is better health and safety-wise, right? 20 years ago, you didn't have to think much about health and safety, but now, of course, as it should be, it's front and center. So every one of these innovations has an underlying rationale that I think every football fan would agree with. So we had former players, former coaches, current players and coaches, lots of others to fit in. And then, most importantly, we tested this stuff. Right. We went down to JUCOs in Mississippi in December of 2018, sort of borrowed a couple of teams for a week and tested a boatload of these things. We tested it with the Spring League, right? Your Call Football. These are sort of semi-pro leagues that some folks may be aware of. And we actually ran through hundreds of kickoffs. And we also, tried some things that we discarded. We had the 5-yard halo concept on a punt, right? Which is what they do up in the CFL. But as we talked to American players, we realized we just couldn't teach that because they just are not used to that. They have a hard time sort of figuring out where that 5-yard, barrier would be. So we abandoned that, said it's not worth it. So there are a lot of things that we looked at that we didn't put into our game. And we also had to be selective, right? You don't want to think too much about rules as a player because that will affect sort of the way you play the game. So we had to be kind of selective in terms of how many innovations we wanted to put in, things that were different from our default rule book, which is the NFL, of course.
This is such an exciting thing just to think about a league trying to test how they can make a game that's been around for a long time even better. What's been around for a long time but is just now getting federally legalized is sports gambling. The thought of the extra point not only being a 1-point opportunity or a 2-point opportunity or a 3-point opportunity, so technically you could score a 9-point touchdown. So if you're down 18, it's still a 2-score game. How much did you guys think about sports gambling in that world kind of while you're creating these rules and knowing that that's going to be a big part of a lot of people's interests, especially when they don't have ties to a team? So gambling is going to draw somebody to a game.
Oh, absolutely. So we had a lot of factors that we brought into all these discussions, one of which was health and safety, one of which was fantasy, one of which was, of course, sports gambling. And I think the extra point opportunities that a team has after they score 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, I think it's awesome because it's more strategy, right?
Yeah.
It's another way that fans can basically second guess a coach. And that's what we like to do as fans. Oh my God, they should have gone, Pep should have gone for 3 or should have gone for 2 in the second quarter, because they were on a roll or whatever. So we thought about, obviously, the sports wagering community. We spent a lot of time with those folks in Vegas with the various, sort of companies that are involved with that. We think it's an important part of what we want to do. Most importantly, right, for the gamblers is a league that has integrity.
Yes.
And that's critical. So that's why we're very open with our rule book and how we're doing this. And we want to make sure that folks feel comfortable wagering on a game.